My name is Jim Miller. I am the Deputy State Chaplain for the state of Michigan. I want to welcome you to an in-depth discussion on a very difficult topic, the topic of suicide. This video is one of 3 in a series that discusses suicide prevention and intervention from a chaplain's perspective. This material is designed to equip soldiers and leaders with a more in-depth look into the complexities inherent in this subject. As with many other Army learnings and Army trainings, we have a list of terminal learning objectives. For this video series, they are the following. Understand and appreciate the size of this public health crisis. Recognize warning signs. Be cognizant of the 4 human dimensions and their associated needs. Reject the notion that help seeking is a sign of weakness. Know how to intervene when identifying a person at risk. And access resources swiftly and accurately. Now, this first video focuses on the problem in the nature of suicide. Suicide, as you know, is a complicated public health crisis with no easy answers. It is a pervasive and persistent threat all must confront in their own private way. To understand the scope of this issue, consider that the World Health Organization reports more than 700,000 people die to suicide every single year in our world. Inching closer to home, suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the U.S. On average, there are 130 suicides every single day. The U.S. suffered 44,834 suicidal deaths in 2020 alone. For perspective, that is double the crowd capacity of Little Caesars Arena in Detroit. Suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death in 15 to 24-year-olds following accidents and homicide. How does the military compare? Well, United Service Organization monitors suicide data among service members. They recently report suicide rates among active duty members are currently at an all-time high since record keeping began after 9/11 and have been increasing at an alarmingly steady pace. In 2021, research found that 30,177 active duty personnel and veterans who served in the military after 9/11 have died by suicide, compared to the 7,057 service members killed in combat in those same 20 years. Think about this for a moment. This means military suicide rates are 4 times higher than deaths that occurred during military operations in Iraq and Iran during the same time frame. This jaw-dropping statistic of 30,177 military suicides is roughly the entire population of, say, Burton City, Michigan, or Marion, Indiana. This health crisis has even broader reach when you consider that for every suicide, there are many more people who attempt suicide. If completed suicides is the tip of the public health iceberg, then suicide attempts and suicidal ideations represent the exponentially growing issue below the surface. Additionally, these numbers are likely skewed due to misreporting deaths and accidents when in reality, they too were suicides. Perhaps the worst danger of all is that suicide has been with us for so long that we become desensitized. All these statistics can be very cold and clinical and sterile, causing us to lose sight of the tremendous toll on the surrounding communities in which suicide occurred. We must remember that with every case, there has been enormous pain and suffering for surviving family members who had to endure the tragedy of losing a dear loved one. Every one of those numbers represented a life filled with rich memories and a budding potential that never was fully realized or never fully blossomed. Sadly, they were cut short, and we who remain must be cautious not to tune out when the subject is broached, but rather to be sensitive and apply diligent effort to intervene and save lives where possible. When observing a room full of people, it is easy to conclude that they all look healthy. Each person can appear to carry themselves with a poise and confidence and a sense of purpose. However, upon closer inspection, below the surface, there may be some sort of an emotional storm that's brewing that is hidden from view. Any one of us may be waylaid by a set of circumstances that, after time, kind of chip away at our resolve. As we think of this, what are some examples of life challenges that can bring a person to their knees? Now, this may be a good time to stop the video and discuss it as a group. Try to find some examples of difficult circumstances that can topple even the strongest among us and bring us to our knees. As we do life, we often encounter stressful problems that bombard our world. We could compare these problems to artillery rounds lobbed at us from unforeseen directions. These circumstantial mortar shells can pepper our sense of purpose and well-being as they explode all around us. Here is a healthy sampling of examples. Life events that feel like incoming artillery include conflict at work, poor academic performance, a relational blowout with a friend or spouse, financial reversals, feeling overwhelmed by daily life demands, troubling medical examination, concerns over global or political developments, cognitive slippage, emotional trauma from the death of a loved one, inadequate social standing, loss of personal identity, being spiritually lost, and overall life dissatisfaction. Whew. That's a depressing laundry list. And now, throw on top of that heap a lingering pandemic with no end in sight. How do you suppose this affects a large swath of society? USA Today carried an article that suggests nearly 2 years into the COVID-19 pandemic, which brought a rise in depression, anxiety, and stress, addiction, and other challenges, almost 9 in 10 registered voters believe there's a mental health crisis in the nation, the poll found. The pandemic has strained student mental health. In fact, school districts like the one in Paw Paw, Michigan, are providing social and emotional support to address increasing anxiety and thoughts of self-harm. Is it any wonder why people run for cover, retreating to some inner sanctum of peace where they can find a way to escape from it all? There are some who feel there is no escape. This brings us to a very vital question. What brings a person to such despair that they would actually consider killing themselves? According to the Mayo Clinic, suicidal thoughts have many causes. Most often, suicidal thoughts are the results of feeling like you just can't cope when you're faced with what seems to be an overwhelming life situation. If you don't have hope for the future, you may mistakenly think suicide is a viable solution. You may experience a sort of tunnel vision, where in the middle of a crisis, you believe suicide is the only way out. When a person finds themselves in this kind of predicament, it is unsettling and downright unbearable. In one sense, they have already given up because all of their solutions failed, and they think the only resort left to them is to get out. Fortunately, there are some tells that can alert us to this sense of hopelessness a person is facing. Knowing the people around you in your social network can signal a need to engage or intervene if necessary. The English Enlightenment thinker John Locke quipped, "The actions of men are the best interpreters of their thoughts." With that in mind, what are the warning signs that may suggest a person is contemplating suicide? This would be another good time to pause the video for a moment and compose a list of as many signs as you can. Suicide warning signs or suicidal thoughts include a great host of behaviors. Here's a compilation from many experts across a variety of mental health fields. A person with suicidal thoughts exhibits hopeless behaviors such as talking about suicide. For example, making statements such as, "I'm going to kill myself," "I wish I were dead," or "I wished I was never born." Developing a plan and securing the means to take one's life, such as buying a gun or stockpiling pills. Withdrawing from social contact and wanting to be left alone. Having dramatic mood swings such as being emotionally high one day and deeply discouraged the next. Preoccupation with death, dying, or violence. Feeling trapped or hopeless about a situation. displaying acute apathy, increasing use of alcohol or drugs, changing normal routines, including eating or sleeping patterns, diminished standards such as grooming, absenteeism, doing risky or self-destructive things such as experimentation with new drugs or driving recklessly, parasuicidal behavior such as self-mutilation, sharp decline in job performance, giving away belongings, or getting affairs in order when there's no other logical explanation for doing this, saying goodbye to people as if they won't be seeing them again, and developing personality changes or being severely anxious or agitated. This list is extensive but not exhaustive. We have even found that some suicide cases were preceded by a person's sense of euphoria because they identified suicide as the solution and believed this brand of freedom was now their brand of freedom. With all of these warning signs, we do not know how long a person has wrestled with these thoughts. In other words, we don't know how much time we have before they act on this impulse. A very important fact to remember is that suicide crises are often brief. 25% of suicide attempts advance from thought to action within 20 minutes or less. 75% of suicide attempts advance from thought to action within 60 minutes or less. Time and space between a person in crisis and their access to lethal means is life-saving. It is imperative that any intervention seeks to tactfully and carefully remove the means a person has for killing themselves. We will discuss more details about intervention in the third video of this series. In the second video to follow, we pivot to more of a solution focus. There we will explore the 4 dimensions of humanity, the descent into and the path out of despair. We will also outline a plan for holistic resilience that can serve as a model for preventing suicide. See you there. Here are just a few questions, some reflective questions you can use to discuss, and when you discuss these, it will hopefully help reinforce the content of this video. Number 1, what do you think about the suicide statistics you just heard? Number 2, discuss what it means to know a person's baseline emotional and behavioral patterns. Number 3, what are the implications for intervention when the time span from thought to action on suicide is so short? Number 4, why do we so often miss the abundant warning signs a person in crisis gives? And lastly, number 5, what can be done to improve our awareness of how people are actually doing around us? So good luck on that discussion. Thank you.